Hey, my friends. So in thinking about videos that I could make during these uncertain times, oh my God, I can't even believe I just said that. Oh, what a joy. Anyway, in thinking about videos that I could make, I've been racking my brain. But I thought, oh, hey, I'm doing this Terra de Marseille class for the Terra Summer School. I don't know if you've heard me mention it once or twice before. The link is below. You can get a season pass it's like 11 classes for, I think like $234. Like, it's a really good deal. So I recommend doing that because you get them for life. So you can always go back and rewatch and reference whatever folks did. And then you can get individual classes if you want to. But you can do whatever you want, but it's a really good deal. But so I thought, well, given that, why not totally make a video about all my Marseille decks so that you could see them and you could see how pretty they are. One of the lessons in the course is actually about how beautiful Terra de Marseille is, which is not something I used to think. And I'm not going to get into that because I want you to take the course. But so I don't actually have that many compared to how many tarot decks I have, although this obviously is a lot. But there's a lot. Now, many of these love to sit on the shelf, and some of them are a little more usable than others, but I'll talk about them and let you take a peek. So I'm just kind of pile things up over here. So, like, what is Terra de Marseille? That it's worth taking a class on, and like, what is it for, and why does anyone give a damn about it? Let's zoom in here. Let's push this aside. So, what is Terra de Marseille? 17th century tarot decks, mass-produced in France, and I love them, and you should love them too. And so there are a few styles of Marseille decks out there in the world. There were many that were produced, some of them in France, some of them not. And I just thought, like, let's take a peek. So a Terra de Marseille deck came before the Rider-Waite-Smith deck, and really sort of was specific to France. And there's some Swiss decks as well, but they were kind of mass-produced around in and around Marseille. That's why they have that name. They would actually at the time have been called Italian tarots, because they still had the Italian suits. By this point, France had moved to the ones that we know today: clubs, hearts, spades, and diamonds. But they're not Italian, and Italian tarots look very different. So I'm not going to do walkthroughs of all of these. In fact, many of them I have walkthroughs of already. So this is really just kind of a curiosity and hopefully something to eat up the time. So I'm getting a little unbalanced, ironically. All right, so we're just going to jump in. So this first one here is one that I use a whole lot. This is the Jean Dodal tarot, created or recreated by Jean-Claude Flournoy. And I know I'm not pronouncing that right. It is, so there are a couple kinds of legit Marseille decks. There's this, which is a refreshing of a historical deck. And then there are reproductions, which I will show you an example of, which reproduce what exists today from decks. So I like this one a lot. It's really big. It's not easy to riffle shuffle. In fact, I can't. But it works well in videos because it is so large. And I love there's such a nice like flow to the lines in this. And it's definitely one of my favorites. It's one of my most used. And it has this great sort of ermine back that looks like a fur. So this is available from tarothistory.com, I believe. But if you Google Jean-Claude Flournoy, you'll find it, and it's really dope. And another deck that I use a lot, probably even more than that one, is another of his decks, and this is the Jean Noblette, which in theory is a recreation of what would have been among the first existent Terra de Marseille decks. So this is kind of the granddaddy of all the TDMs out there. And there are different versions of this. This again is a recreation or a restoration, so to speak. It's got a new coat of paint with fresh lines, and I like this one because it's small and it like I can do a big spread with it really easily. And so that is the Jean Noblette, which again probably my most used. Oh, I forgot one, you guys. Hang on one sec. I'm not even going to tell you which one I forgot. But anyway, so those are those two. And then I'll sort of keep in that vein. So another one that's a refreshment, I guess, a refreshing is the CBD Terra de Marseille. So this was Yoav Bendov's creation. And this is really easy to get. This is a US Games deck. He did self-publish it, and in his self-published version, there were no copyrights, but the copyright's really tiny. So for folks that are like dipping their toes in the water of Terra de Marseille, this is actually the deck I usually recommend the most because it's easy to find. It's US Games, so you can get it online almost anywhere. He did such a beautiful job. His aim in recreating the deck was to make it look like Terra de Marseille. This would have been the Conver, which is what CBD, Conver Bendov. And it's, he wanted it to look fresh and modern and still Marseille. And he wanted it to look kind of easy on the eyes of a modern reader. And he wanted it to have the correct color correspondences as he saw them. And so that's what this is. And so this is one of the decks I recommend for most folks who are like, I kind of want to like play with Marseille, but I'm not sure, because it is affordable. It's easy to get. Like the first two that I showed you, you do have to order from France, and it takes a minute to get them, especially now. But this is a really good one, and it has the added benefit of being mass market cardstock, so it shuffles so freaking well. It's so good. US Games, for mass-produced cards, they really do a nice job. And there's a little white booklet that he wrote, but his book is very, very good and was definitely influential for me. And the book is actually, I think, available in both versions. So there's his self-published edition, which was called The Open Reading. And then Llewellyn picked it up as The Marseille Tarot Revealed. It's the same book. Let's start getting this out of the way. But you can get either version. I really do recommend it, just because he was such a lovely human. Not that I met him, but you can just see it in the way he wrote, and that he actually made an open source deck. You know what I mean? All the images that he created, he actually posted on his website so you could download. I'm not sure if it's still active. I haven't been in a while, but they're there. So the next one is called Terra de Marseille Edition Millennium, the Millennium Edition. So this is another recreation. So what does it say on the box here? Restoration of the 78 Arcana of the Marseille Tarot based on rediscovery of their original sacred geometry. Now, anytime I hear like rediscovery of their original sacred geometry with Terra de Marseille, I do not ride that ship. It makes me kind of nuts. The length to which esoteric-minded folks go to make it seem like Terra de Marseille was anything more than a playing card deck. I don't know why we have to do that. There's a book that I actually got that was translated. I think it was this edition. I don't buy that. I mean, I just don't. That said, it's a beautiful edition. This is another one that is, you have to get from like a purveyor of indie decks. I got this in person at Collect Tarot at the Reader Studio a few years ago, and sadly, the proprietor of that shop has passed. Although I did hear that they're going to revive it. This is actually one of my favorite editions because it's so easy on the eyes, and the coloring is nice, and the cardstock is really nice. It's a little tough to shuffle, but the cardstock is really yummy. And it's very sharp. Like the resolution of the images is very, very sharp and crisp and immediate. And I kind of love it. Where I was saying before about the esoteric minded having to insist that the sacred geometry was retained, like, just say we added sacred geometry to Terra de Marseille because we think that should be a part of it. I can't believe that these mass market decks that that anyone put any energy into sacred freaking geometry, because it was like Bicycle playing cards, putting sacred geometry into their poker decks. Like, it just does not make sense. It was a game, and I'm down with that. I love that we can use a tarot, a game, to learn more about the world. So just let's just say, hey, if you use sacred geometry in tarot, it can add this other layer if you're into that. But let's not pretend that it was part of it. There's no evidence of that at all. And I get very cranky because it's not necessary. I don't understand why sort of like age equals value, Not that, something old isn't good, just that it doesn't, just because it may or may not have had that thing. I don't know. I just think it's stupid, honestly. All right, so those are all restorations. This is a reproduction, and I did a video on this one recently, so I won't spend too much time on it, but this is the Tarot Claude Brosius. So this is a Swiss deck, and this was a gift, so there's a note in there. Beautiful backs, one of my favorite backs. And this, you can see, is very different. This is much like it might have looked using old printing techniques. And again, like, just to my point about the esoteric stuff, like, can you see if they were really trying to make an esoteric tool, they might have probably spent more time on it. What I love about Terra de Marseille is how wonky it looks. And what I like about this particular deck is, I don't know if you can see it, but there's even like ghosting from other cards in the print. And I think that that's just super duper cool. And the coloring is really cool, good. And so this is a TDM that is a reproduction of what it would have looked like when it was printed. And this was a deck that was a Swiss deck. And it's very, very cool. And if you ever read anything by Camellia Elias, she will actually use sort of printing anomalies and whatnot in her reading as sort of a as something that might mean something in the spread. So that is that one. So that's the only reproduction I actually have. Everything else is sort of a recreation. And I think we're kind of moving away. Those are like the straight up legit Terra de Marseille decks that I have. Everything else I'm going to show you is kind of a riff on Terra de Marseille. If you are going to take my class, I really recommend something like what we just did, purely just for the learning experience. You can use any of these decks as you go along. I just feel like as a student, as sort of putting your toes in the water, something fairly traditional is a nice place to start. So if nothing else, you kind of understand where we're coming from. But it's up to you. This is an interesting deck. This isn't really a Marseille. It's inspired by Marseille because it's a French deck. This is the Grand Tarot Boolean, which is, you can still get it. It's not super cheap, but you can find it on eBay. It does not have the Marseille arrangement of cards, and so as such, it's not really a Marseille deck, but it's in that style. I did some research on this deck recently, and I meant to like retain that information, but again, pandemic brain is preventing me from achieving that. So you can see that the trumps are very Marseille, but the pips are not. It's just a very cool deck. I have a video. This was a wish list deck for a long time, and got my hands on it, and I do use it. And for a deck this size, it actually shuffles really nicely. It's kind of a curiosity. If you read A Wicked Pack of Cards, which is kind of the consummate history of tarot, there is a chapter about this deck and its creator, and it's worth looking at. So that's the Grand Tower Berlin. Very cool. Not really Marseille per se, but still dope. I think we're getting into now sort of more modern stuff. So I just did a video on this, so I won't spend too much time on it. This is a riff on Marseille. It is using the playing cards as we know them today, their suits, kind of with Marseille-influenced courts and trumps. And I love it very much, and it's very cool. But I did do a whole walkthrough on this too. So that's not really a Marseille deck. It's Marseille-inspired. As are a lot of what I'm about to show you. I don't know what's going on with this one. This is Le Tarot Noir. It is a French deck. I bought it from French Amazon. I think for a while you could get it really easily, and then suddenly you couldn't. Then I heard it was coming back into print or was out of print. I don't know. But it's very cool, and the only thing that I do not like about it is the box and the size of the cards. They are huge. And the box does not hold them that well. Everything's in French, so there's a book, but it's in French. So if you read French, more power to you. This is very cool. It's very kind of, it's got a little kind of gothic, kind of weird quality to it, but it is sort of using the Marseille pip arrangements. I haven't looked at this in a while. I forgot how much I liked it. So good, guys. I love it. I just wish it were a more usable size because it's huge. I mean, if you compare it to the little Noblette, it's like crazy. But the art is super cool. It's just so amazing. And it's gilded, which is fun. Although I'm not as big on gilding as I used to be. Even gilding tarnishes. I love this hermit. So that's Le Tarot Noir. This is Terra de Celia, which is a newish deck by Leonard de Narciso. Comes in a tin. Love it very much. This had sort of a weird journey getting into the world, but I think it's still, easy to get now. It is playing card size, which I'm a fan of. And it's very Marseille. It just has this beautiful color scheme. So theoretically, you could use this with a classic if you're really turned off by Marseille. Like, I do kind of think it's good to start with something that is traditional, just to get your sense of it, and then you can kind of branch out. But I am known for being iconoclastic anyway, so what do I know? I don't really follow rules either. But I love this deck. The coloration is gorgeous. The art is beautiful. It's just great. And it has this beautiful back. And I edged it in this sort of wine red because it just felt like it all went together so well. And again, I like a playing card size deck for readings because I like to do, big 9 card spreads. And that makes it easy in this sort of limited space we've got here. The Marshmallow Marseille. I believe this is still, so Kelly Bear made this pouch for me. This is similar. It's like a more whimsical approach with a more pastel color scheme, but very, very wonderful. And I used this in my book, Tarot on Earth. And it still makes me really happy to see it. It's just very cute. It's not shallow for something that is so whimsical. So I've shown this deck many times, but playing card size lays out really nicely. I will admit, this is the first edition. I prefer the first edition to the later editions that have the holographic backs. That's not my jam. It's still pretty, but Down to the wire. This is the 7th Sphere Marseille influenced deck. It says it's a Marseille deck. It's not strictly. In this case, the pips are very Marseille, but the trumps are a little bit different, and there's 2 extra cards. So this is by the same, this is by Labyrinthos, which also did the Golden Thread Tarot, and there's a Lenormand that matches this. Some of the cards have, I don't know if you can see it, like, not gilding, but like foil on them. It's a beautiful color scheme, but you can see this isn't sort of straight Marseille trumps. They're very, very different. So I would not recommend this for the class. It's kind of like Rider-Waite-Smith trumps and Marseille pips with this beautiful pastel color scheme. So it's really lovely. I mean, it's a beautiful deck. The only reason I don't use this deck more is actually, this is this plastic cardstock, or I guess plastic stock. And people really like it. I find that it does not shuffle well at all. It goes everywhere. So I'm not a fan of the cardstock, gotta be honest. But well packaged, and it's a really beautiful, beautiful deck. Like I said, there's a Lenormand, the 7th Sphere Lenormand, that looks just like this. It's playing card size. And then these last 2 are just whimsical ones. This is the Terra de Marseille Parpolka, which is a very kind of strange... I have shown this many times. Well, maybe not many times, but... Again, not really a Marseille deck, but it's got these skulls on the back. And it's just very gory. So I tend to pull this out around Halloween. I would say it's very intestinal, because there's all these sort of intestines. And it's not strictly, a lot of the pips are very Terra de Marseille, but not all of them. So, and then finally the last one is mine. My Halloween deck that I made. I wanted a Halloween themed Marseille. No one would make one for me, so I did it myself. And it's a playful, fun thing that I'm very proud of. And you can get it on GameCrafter if you want it. I've done a walkthrough of it because I did a bunch of videos on this, so again, I won't belabor the point. But yeah, so that's me. That's mine. So those are all the Marseille decks I have, I think. And I think they're beautiful. And I think that you should give it a try. So I think that's it for today. And I hope you're doing well and staying safe and taking care of your emotional, mental, physical health. And trying to do the same. And we'll talk soon. Be good.